Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is Tuesday. Is it the 18th? Wasn't it just October 1st yesterday? It's the 18th of October. My name is Kerry Holzman. Thanks you guys so much for tuning in. I see a lot of friendly faces here, familiar faces in the chat room. Everybody's eager to go right on. Love it. And today, we're going to set up, configure, unbox, and do the complete work of what it is to get a network attached storage drive. We're going to put the drives in it, configure the drives, and configure the share on the network. And just for general purpose use, there are far more advanced configurations with security and passwords, etc. We're not going to do that. I don't normally ever do that, quite frankly. Whether it's a small business or a home user, they generally just want a large storage area accessible from numerous computers or even their mobile devices on their home network. It's not a backup, but it's a local large storage area, and they often have the ability of having RAID arrays, or a redundant array of independent disks, that allow for a drive failure, sometimes two drive failures. But it doesn't accommodate a theft, a fire, a flood. You're still going to lose your data that way. And because it's often a very large capacity, backing the data up is always time consuming and never easy. And to get that much data out of the building to properly back it up is expensive and inconvenient. But I will say, as a computer technician, there are some things I like doing much more so than other things. There's many facets to this job, and setting up particularly Synology NAS devices. I don't know why. I have an affinity for all things storage. It's just my thing. I'm interested in flash drives more so than most of the other tech involved with computers these days. I'm always fascinated with the speed, the size of modern flash drives. And when I can get a flash drive this big, that's 1 terabyte of storage, that small, it excites me. So if I can get one that's 2 terabytes that small, I want to check it out and see, is it really slow? Is it unreliable? Is it good for 5 minutes and then everything slows down? So for whatever reason, that really interests me. It really sparks my curiosity. And when we do network attached storage drives, I've always, for whatever reason, I guess because it's related to storage, I've always been, I found it very enjoyable to set up the old Seagate Black Armor storage drives back in the day. Once I found the Synologies, there was no going back to the Seagates. These are so much better, in my opinion. Easier to set up, better interface, more reliable, more robust, and these days, very, very affordable. That's the other thing that I find a bit amusing and puzzling, is no matter how inexpensive this stuff gets, there are still a lot of people out there complaining about how expensive it is. Well, clearly, these people must be fairly new to this industry, because these prices are crazy cheap. And it's only going to get cheaper, I'm sure, combined that the value of the dollar is less. So not only does a network attached storage drive cost less, but it costs less in today's dollars. So it's not as though it's the same price, but because of the value of today's dollars, it's less. It's both. It sells for less, and the value of the dollar is worth less. It is a bargain. And I can only tell you that with such excitement, because I know what I and my customers have paid for this stuff way back 20 years ago. And furthermore, how you had to explain what it was, whereas now most people familiar with computers understand cloud storage or the concept of network attached storage. This also can be your own cloud storage as well. It can be configured so that you can access it from outside anywhere in the world if you want to. I never set that up, because the minute you turn that on, you're opening up an opportunity for somebody to potentially hack it. Of course, if you follow all the safety protocols, you'll likely be okay. The other thing is updates. Anytime you have a network attached storage, you effectively have what is more than likely very important data connected to the internet 24/7. And so the hackers know this, and if they can figure out an exploit in the operating system of a main manufacturer's NAS, a name brand NAS, then they can potentially hack it at any point, even while you're using it, and you wouldn't know. There was a recent slew of attacks on QNAP, a manufacturer of NASs, that only affected people who weren't updating the operating system on the QNAP. The updates are always free. What I like about the Synology is it can automatically update, and you don't have to constantly look for updates like typically with a router. And so as long as you allow that to occur, and you're always getting those latest updates, then you should never be a victim of that, provided you follow good security practices online with a serious password and a login name that isn't admin. I mean, that's a bad start right there. So Synology's done a lot where they used to allow the name of admin, and you can still use the login of admin, but they will harass you about it. And every time you log in, they'll tell you this is not safe and you should change it to literally anything else, as well as have a strong password. So today, that's what we're going to do. And I was just looking at my intro rolling, and I just wanted to correct something on the intro. Didn't look like it was quite full screen. There, that's fixed. Now, before I get started, does anybody have any questions about what network attached storage or NAS is and why someone would want it? I'd be happy to address that before we start. And what I'm going to do today is essentially what a customer might pay me to do, which is we need to have storage available to access from any computer in our building. Servers are very expensive. A lot of my customers are averse to cloud storage because they don't know where the data is. They want control of it. And so what they will ask me for is, first and foremost, explain to them an option, a solution, and price, and the pros and cons of that versus other options. So in this case, this customer already has a Synology NAS. They have a 4-drive, a 4-bay Synology NAS, and it's probably 5 or 6 years old. And I used to only do 4-bay network attached storage drives because that was the only way you could get to any decent capacity of storage. So I think we went with 4 3-terabyte drives or 4 4-terabyte drives. We put it in a RAID 5, which means each of the 4 drives contains data of the other 3. And what that means, it's a mathematical parity recovery. If any one of the 4 drives fails, the data from the other 3 can rebuild the 4th drive and can operate on their own. So you can continue to use the NAS and not even have any impact with usage of it. But ideally, you'll get that bad drive replaced. Once you replace it, the drive will rebuild the data on it. So now the customer's running out of room. So I think they had when you do a 4-drive array with RAID 5, you lose 1 drive of capacity. It's very easy math. If you had 4 10-terabyte drives, you do not have 40 terabytes available, you have 30. You lose 1 drive of capacity for parity. Then that's for recovery. These days, you can buy drives up to 20 terabytes, and they're going to get bigger and bigger, but on the consumer side, about 20 terabytes is as large as you can go, I think. So you don't need 4 of those, because then you'd have 60 terabytes after parity. And it would be expensive. You're looking at around $500 for a 20 terabyte drive times 4. And that's a lot of data to back up. It's a lot of data to lose. So what I said to the customer is I said, look, rather than upgrade the Synology you've got with newer drives, what I would do is get a 2-drive Synology, which is what we have here, the DS218 Plus, and this device comes without drives. You have to provide whatever drives you want. And then we buy drives that are specifically designed for network attached storage use, which means they're meant to be left on 24/7, and they have sort of an anti-vibration technology, because with the drives sit right next to each other like that, if you use like regular desktop drives, you'll likely have a failure sooner. You won't get the robustness and reliability. So it's not just a label they're slapping on it. It's a different design to withstand the environment and the usage that's unique to being in a network attached storage device. So with that said, I said, look, we can get two 20 terabyte drives, put it in a RAID 1 instead of a RAID 5. RAID 1 is where one drive mimics everything the other drive does at all times. You delete a file, it deletes it over here. You get a virus, you get the virus on both. It happens nearly simultaneously, but it's invisible. So you buy two 20 terabyte drives, and your total capacity in RAID 1 is 20 terabytes. You might go, oh, but you bought 40. Yes, but you're backing 20 up. And since you don't know which drive will fail first, the mirror drive or the main drive, it makes no difference to you either way. Regardless of when the drives fail, and they will eventually fail, they both likely won't fail at the same time unless there's like a massive power spike. But just through natural usage, it's statistically unlikely both drives would fail simultaneously. So when one of the 20 terabyte drives fails, and it will in time, you'll never know as far as using it goes. It still works exactly the same, but you will get a notification that's telling you you've got a failed drive and you need to replace it. Now, you can postpone that, you can put it off. Who knows how much time you've got? But if you procrastinate so long as that the second drive fails, well, now you've lost everything unless you made an external backup. So the idea is when you get the notification of a failed drive, that you make it a priority to replace that drive as soon as possible. With the smaller drives, and especially with a 4-drive array, I used to keep a spare drive brand new in the package that matched the same drives that were put in it at the time I installed it. It's like driving around with a spare tire. And so what I would do is if a drive failed, and I used to deal with failed drives more often than I do now, quality's gone up. I would just swap out the bad drive with the brand new one. I usually just put a brand new drive on top of the unit. Customer calls, I go in there, I open the drive up, pop it in, it rebuilds automatically. I take the old drive back with me, and if it's under warranty, I do the RMA with the manufacturer. That takes a couple weeks. When the return drive comes back, then that drive is now the new spare, and it's just around the wheel goes. If you have 4 drives, you have 4 drives that can fail. If you have 2 drives, you have half as many drives that can fail. So in theory, by going to 2 drives, and by simplifying it, you're reducing the odds of a failure, or the number of failures you can have, statistically speaking. So there's benefits that it's simpler, it takes up less space, it uses less power by putting in 2 drives instead of 4. Again, when we used 4, we did it because that was the only way we could get to 10 or 12 terabytes. These days, buying a drive that's 10 or 12 terabytes is not a big deal. So what we've got today are 2 Seagate IronWolf Pro 20 terabyte drives. Those are about $475 a piece. And then we've got a Synology DS218 Plus, which is everything you need but the drives, and that's about $300. It's a bargain. And so we have to configure this. How we configure it is up to us. So I'm going to show you just a basic, normal, ordinary configuration that most of my customers have. And this is a great excuse. I've been wanting to do this. I tried simulating it a few videos ago, and I had an older Synology NAS unit. This is a new one, and now it mostly just walks you through it. It asks you some questions, you answer them, and I think you'll be impressed with how easy it is. So looking through the chat, once again, before we get started, let me see if there's any questions I can answer. It looks like we have a super chat from Nicholas Menard, contributes 10 Canadian dollars. He says, "Hey Kerry, glad I could catch another wonderful live stream from the man. I've changed my computer case today, and the rascal wouldn't boot unless I swapped out the motherboard standoffs." Huh. Well, as long as you got it figured out, doesn't matter why, unless it's a problem you keep seeing over and over again. Likely you had a grounding issue here. Lawn Dog said, hey, this is going to be an awesome learning experience for everyone, but a great introduction to a fantastic product. There are other manufacturers of NAS. It's my opinion, my preference to prefer Synology. That's what I'm going to support. Remember, I have to support this. It's not like it's going in my house and any problems are my own. This goes to a customer. If the customer ever has problems, they're calling me. So I don't want to support just whatever's cheapest or what's ever on sale. There are brands like Thecus, QNAP. There's one I'm missing. I know Netgear makes them.
LED.
Who? Western Digital? Western Digitals. I see, and I'm not into those because you have to learn a whole nother interface. I'd rather stick with one and get to know it really well than have to remember how you do it with this manufacturer versus how you do it with that manufacturer. Makes my life easier, and the prices are good. It's not like you're paying more for the Synology brand. Also, with QNAP having that whole massive virus that attacked it, a lot of people that owned QNAPs that weren't keeping them up to date got ransomware on their systems. And as far as I know, that's not happened with Synology, but I know it's easy to keep the Synologies up to date. Default, just out of the box, is to get the auto updates. All right, so looking back here in the chat, let's see if we have any questions here. Steve Dodd says, hello, Kerry from Waterford, Michigan. Ah, my Michigan peeps in the house. And Steve Gunnick says, hello from just south of Grand Rapids. Well, why aren't I there? Fred Sunderman says hello, and Mike Perodin, and Catherine Anna Hauserman's joining us. There's our friend Rick Lakes in the chat. And David Herzog, and Greg Guy, Josh Kinder, B.H. Ringer. All right, well, I am not seeing any questions regarding the NAS. If you did ask it and I'm not seeing it, please ask it again. Hopefully I'll see it the second time around. Nicholas says the new case that he moved his system to is a Fractal Design Meshify 2 Compact. He says, and luckily it will be, this is the only one I've ordered, another one for a build I'll do for a member of my family. Huh. Steve says, you are not in Michigan probably because it's starting to get colder. Huh, I wish. I would love it if it were freezing cold. I'm sweating and we're in the middle of October. So yeah, no, I like the cold. All right, Mike Visions with a £2 contribution in Super Chat says hello to myself and to everybody in the chat. There's Matt Power and Patrick Rousseau joining us, along with Jim KJ3N. Bahan in the chat wants to know if it's more feasible to build a NAS or purchase one. That's a great question. I see a lot of people that will take an old computer and put something like FreeNAS on it. I did that back in the early days, back when NASs were more expensive, a little cost prohibitive. These days they're not. The downsides of reusing an old computer is they're not power efficient. They will cost you more money and electricity to run. You will need a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor to do anything with it. You're taking a desktop computer typically that's older. It's going to be physically larger and require more space. And you're repurposing it in most cases instead of recycling it and maybe feeling better about that by turning it into another function. As somebody who has to support it, basically whatever you're saving in money, I will bill you 4 times over in labor to get that set up for you. And then you'll be more likely to have problems with it. You have to understand that there are hobbyists and then there are professionals. And the hobbyists may do things that are very impractical because it might save them money and they've got all the time in the world, and it doesn't matter if it's got problems here and there. It doesn't, sure, they may not look forward to it, but it's not as though their whole business gets shut down and their customers are going to go somewhere else. Well, they have to get this sorted quickly, and they have to come up with the money to fix it in order to generate more revenue from their business, and they can't generate the revenue from the business unless the unit's running. So when you're talking about that kind of pressure, having something that's designed to be a NAS out of the gate that doesn't have a keyboard, mouse, or monitor, you're going to plug it in, it's going to sip the power, versus a desktop PC, especially an older one. It's going to cost more money to run per year just on electricity usage. You're going to have more maintenance that you have to figure out on your own, and you have to be proactive with that and know what you need to do. The Synology, you can automate the updates so they happen automatically, as well as keeping you informed on what's going on at all times. And it doesn't require really the level of technical knowledge one would have to set up their own NAS. So a hobbyist would do that perhaps as a challenge to themselves to use old hardware. And there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're responsible for it, and it's in a place of business or even a customer's house, and they have a problem with it, you will have more problems statistically with a NAS you build yourself, be it maintenance, be it security, whatever it is, versus just buying a NAS and having it do exactly what it's specifically designed to do. It's more efficient, it's more compact, it's less maintenance, and it'll cost you less money statistically in the long run. So to each their own. I would never set up a free NAS. I would never do it. I'm just too busy and my data is too important. I would rather just do it once and be done with it. The NAS I have over at Studio A, I set that up years ago and really haven't touched it. It just updates itself. It's never had a problem. The NASs I set up for my business clients, since I switched over to Synology, there's really nothing I need to do. They just go for years and years and years and years and years. And I like that they self-maintain. Now, yes, you could set up a free NAS box and you can configure it to do that if you know how and if you know what needs to be updated. Absolutely, but it's just far more labor. And as a side project for yourself, it's a great project. It's a great way to learn. But as a business model to sell and support, I don't think you'll be in business very long. Jim wants to know, does the Synology put the drives in standby mode when you're not accessing it? Yes, absolutely it does. There's other things you can do with the Synologies too. You can run like a virtual machine on them and have Linux on them. You can have them run processes. You can have them run video rendering off to the side. They won't do it quickly, but you can offload that off the main PC over to your NAS, and it might take 10 times longer, but it's offloaded. So if it's nothing you need right away, you want to use your resources on your PC to continue other work and let that process off to the side, and you'll get the finished product tomorrow. We're not going to cover that today. Also, like surveillance systems, if you've got cameras and you want to constantly be recording and storing recorded video of a property, the surrounding property, parking lot. Different customers may have different requirements for how long they want to store video. And if you've got 8 cameras and they're recording video constantly, or even just recording movement, it's going to eat up a lot of space. And you can buy a surveillance, specifically designed storage unit for surveillance, usually made by the same manufacturer who makes the cameras, but it's all proprietary. Something like this, you could use it for surveillance and use it for storage and use it as a virtual machine and use it, simultaneously for many things. You could back your computers up to the NAS. For example, in an office that has 10 desktops, we could load something like a Cronus and have a Cronus make an image and put that image on the NAS, and then have it update that image whatever frequency we want during, let's say, the weekend or early hours of the morning, late hours of the night. So it's hands off, and you just have to audit it to make sure it's actually happening and there aren't any errors. But again, you'd still, if you're going to use this as a backup, then you want to back this up somewhere off-site. Because if you have a robbery, someone comes in and steals all the computers and steals your NAS, what good were your backups? But most of the time when you need to restore in backups, it's due to a drive failure or a corruption. Maybe a PC is getting replaced, and it's really convenient to have it local. But it's by far not enough. It's better than nothing, but it's not enough. So just so we clarify how all of this, what to expect from it for the amount of money you're spending and how you could use it, these are some examples. Patrick said Western Digital purple drives are designed for surveillance use. That's correct, but specifically for use in surveillance devices. So if you were going to use the Synology for surveillance, you don't use the purple drives. You'd still use either the Western Digital Red or the Seagate IronWolf. Those are the drives designed for NAS use. Western Digital's purple drives are very slow drives that don't generate a lot of heat, because recording video doesn't require much. So you definitely would use purple drives in a surveillance recorder, but you'd use NAS drives in a NAS, even if you're using the NAS to record surveillance. If that makes any sense, I hope it does. I don't want to confuse you with that. Terrell Cochran says, it's my understanding to do virtualization on a Synology, it has to be a plus model. That's probably right. The amount of processing power and RAM you're going to get, with the plus you get more, and you're going to need as much as possible to do virtualization. It's going to run slow. It's going to run like a 10-year-old computer. But the idea is that you've offloaded it, and it's nothing that's really time demanding. It's more like a service that you're running. All right, so let's get started. Shall we get camera girl out here for the close-ups? Give me just a second. We'll get you guys on the close-up camera here, and you can watch with much more detail. Let's see. I think that is camera 3. It's 3, isn't it? 3. Why isn't it coming on? That should be 3. Oh, I see. You're in the corner. Okay. Why are we square? Why is that not full screen? Are we in camera mode, movie mode on that camera? There you go. I don't know what you did, but you fixed it. All right, well, move on in. Here we go. So this is how little a NAS is today. Look how thin the box is. That's the whole thing. That's a Synology DS218 Plus. They're right around $300. And so we're going to do everything live, unscripted, as always. I have no idea if something might be dead on arrival, if there might be a used product in this box. Maybe there's a big brick in here. I don't know. But I ordered everything off Amazon, and typically 98% of the time, everything's exactly the way it should be. And I want to share the real experience with you, from unboxing to configuration and setup. So here we go. We've got a little box here that has a power cable. We have a network cable. We have a power adapter or power brick. We've got some screws to secure the drives. And then we have a quick start guide right here, which of course I'm not going to read, but I would encourage you to do so if you decide to buy one of these and you've never set one up before. This is the NAS itself, which is remarkably, it's very light because there's no drives in it. And that's it. That's all we need. at least from this box. And you know what? I think I'll just set that stuff in there for now. And we'll close this up and move it out of the way. Now, what drives me crazy is when people don't want to remove the plastic. This stuff always ships to protect it from getting scratched, especially on surfaces like glossy surfaces or really smooth surfaces, or sometimes the company logo, and then it fades to yellow really quick and it looks terrible. So sometimes they'll have writing on it that'll say remove before use because it can create heat issues. This is just for protection in shipping. So this little piece that's on here, this whole door comes off, you see. And then the tape is just there to keep it from getting scratched up, because then somebody will want to return it, even though there's nothing wrong with it. They'll say, oh, it arrived with a scratch, I want a new one. So they put the tape on it, and then people leave the tape on, and then that can create all kinds of weird problems. Anyway, most new stuff, if you buy a new TV, the remote's going to have it on there. It's really thin, you peel the plastic off. It's supposed to be peeled off for the consumer. So on this, that's pretty much all we have. On the back of it, you'll see we've got, I think that's a Kensington lock, so nobody can walk off with it. We've got our Ethernet port. Some of the models will have two, either to aggregate or to have a failover. Two USB 3s where you could plug in a flash drive or USB storage. We have what appears to be, what's that red port there? Looks like an external SATA port right there. I think it says eSATA right next to it. Of course, we've got our serial number, MAC address, and our barrel plug connector. And all we're going to really need to do to hook this up is give it power and plug it into our router. Once the drives are in it, we're going to do everything through the browser. Now, I'm just realizing as I hear my phone beep that I didn't silence my phone. So let me just silence that. All right, so here we have the two 20 terabyte drives. This is how Amazon ships them to you. Now, these are mechanical drives. They are fragile, and that's why you'll see the packing is pretty excessive. All of this for just one drive. And I have to figure out how it comes out of the package. There's one. There's your documentation, warranty. You just put that away. I'll just set that over here, and then we'll grab the other one out of here. All I did prior to starting today's video is I cut the tape. I've never opened these, so hopefully we don't have anything damaged. And you'll see these are 20 terabytes a piece. They're pretty heavy. Clear my bench here. All right. Whew, sweaty. So with this little door here, there are lights behind it that indicate the status. Usually that'll be a green light. The LAN should be a green light when it's established an IP address. And then a green light or flashing green light for disk activity for disk 1 and for disk 2. If a drive fails, the failed drive will have like a red light next to it. But you should also get a notification, assuming you enable the notification. And I'll show you how to do that. The drive itself is going to slide into one of these two bays. We've got two bays here. I'm trying to remember how these come out. I think you pull up and slide the drive out. Slide the drive caddy out. So we can take both of these out. At this point, it doesn't matter which one goes in which slot. They're both the same. And I'm going to set that aside. And we have to put the drives in the caddy with the connector at this end. And what that's going to require is there's this little piece right here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me come over here. This piece comes out. I got to remember how to do this. Usually you can grab it at the end, right there, and just pull it away. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. Just right at the end, pull it, set that down. Take one of the drives, doesn't matter which one. And let's get it out of the package, which is probably the hardest part of this whole deal. How do I get this out of the package? All right. So with the connectors towards the back, we're going to set this down with the label up. We're going to set it down just like that. Now the holes on the side, you should be able to see like the center hole here lined up. And we're going to take these pieces, these plastic pieces that we removed, and we're going to set them right back in, put the front in first. And that locks one side in. Same thing to the other side. You'll see there's these little posts, and they go into the holes that would traditionally be used as, say, let's say screws if we were putting this in a desktop computer. So this is a nice toolless installation. Now I know, you said, Kerry, there was a bag of screws. You said for the hard drives. Well, yes, if you want to, these screws right here, you'll see they're short and they're flush. These can be used instead of the drive rails, and in some Synology NASs, you put the screws at the bottom of the tray. I'm noticing this tray does not have the mounting holes for that. Usually they do both. It's not usually one or the other. In this case, I'm not quite sure what scenario you would use these on this Synology. What that means, if the drive ever fails, you don't need a screwdriver or anything to swap the drive out. It's really handy. With one of these done, we can install it into either bay. It's only going to go in one direction. So if you're putting it in backwards, like upside down, it won't go. So I'm trying to remember which side was up on this. Hold on. Let me take a peek. I think does it go this way? Yeah. So there's a track. If you look very carefully in there, there's a track that aligns with the track up in there. If I pull this out, I'll show you again. See the tracks? There's a track right here. On each side of the holes is a track. This is so hard to do backwards. Let me just say, it's super easy when you're looking at it straight on. And you're just going to push that in and it'll click. Drive 1 is installed. We're going to do the exact same thing with the remaining drive. So that's the other benefit of having a 2-drive NAS versus a 4-drive NAS. I only have to do this twice. I don't have 3 more of them to do. Not that it's difficult, but it's just less labor, less work. Get that out of the way. So there's our other Seagate IronWolf Pro 20 terabyte drive. Once again, I'm going to pop out these little, I'm sure they have a name for these. Connectors to the outside, label up, push it forward as far as it'll go, and make sure that the mounting hole in the middle is visible through the hole to ensure you've got it aligned properly and sitting all the way down. And then once more, we'll put these back on. A little plastic tab goes through that hole and holds the drive in for us. And it clicks in and locks into the rail so it won't fall out. And the same thing to the other side.
Before you do that,
Yeah.
the 2 holes,
Yeah.
that might be where the screws would go, depending on the drive.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You could use the screws
Yeah.
instead of this, but I don't know why you'd want to. I can't imagine a reason you'd want to. So that seems weird that they included them, but perhaps there's a scenario I'm not thinking of, but
The drives.
I don't know.
The drives.
Maybe, you know what I'm thinking? Maybe if you're using like solid state 2.5-inch drives, you see the holes here and here, you definitely would have to use the screws. And they have to have these flush head. If the screw has a head on it, it'll bump up against the other rail and it won't go in. It'll block itself. So you have to use the flat head. So I guess if you were putting 2.5-inch drives in, you have no choice. You have to screw them in. The rails are too far apart. And then if that's the case, that would be a scenario where you would absolutely have to have these. So that makes sense now. Okay, finally, we're going to put this other drive in. Which way did it go? We went with the label facing to the right. Once again, we'll slide that in. It locks in. Now, I can just put this little door back on. It's just got these little rubber grommets, and it just kind of sits softly. And you notice where the lights are, it's all labeled. And this is going to cover that up, which is why you're going to see the same labels on this, and the light will shine through this. So you could leave this off, in other words. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. And you'll also notice you don't see any round holes that this goes in. This actually fits between the lever or the handle. It's kind of clever. When you line this up, like I don't know if you can see it this way, it just fits in and it just softly clicks into place. No tools. And now this thing is heavy. That's why I was surprised when I took it out of the box. I'm used to these things weighing quite a bit. That's because they're always propagated with drives, and typically 4 drives, so it would weigh nearly twice as much. Now, with that done, we can give it some power, so that's just a matter of plugging in our power adapter here, and I've got to find an Ethernet cable and plug it in. You don't want this wireless. It would be way too slow to be transmitting data back and forth. You definitely want this wired. The good news is you don't have to put it anywhere close by, wherever the router is, so you can run a real short patch cable. There's no excuse to need wireless for this. You will just plug it into your router and just sit it right down next to your router. And then Ethernet cable, right? That's what I was going to get. What did I do with it? Here we go. So Ethernet cable, I'll plug that in. With everything plugged in, now we can turn it on. A lot of my customers complain when I help them over the phone and they've had a power outage, they have to turn the NAS back on. And when they go to turn the NAS back on, they can't find the power button unless it's in a really brightly lit room, because the power button is black and the NAS is black, and they don't know, is it a switch, is it a button? And they don't necessarily see it. And their big complaint is, why do they make the button black to blend in with the case? Especially older customers who don't have great vision to begin with. But bear in mind that that is a known popular complaint. The power button on the Synologies is always on the lower right. And once it turns on, it's going to take a little while to boot. So what it's doing right now, you'll see that light's flashing right there. What that's doing is it's building an operating system on a portion of the drive. Once that's done, we'll be able, well, first of all, this light will change, and then we'll be able to log in via the web interface. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute, but in the meantime, let's go back over to the main camera and see if we have any questions while we're waiting. This doesn't take very long, but I can't do anything with it until the operating system gets put on there. You're good. Thank you. CCTV user says, I've got my NAS to auto power on after a power failure. I don't do that. I intentionally want them to stay off. Here in Arizona, when we have power failures, you might get 3 or 4 right in a row. That's what's going to cause the damage. So my preference is, if we're having a situation that the power gets interrupted, then I want the NAS to stay off. You hear the beep? That's telling me it's ready now. So in any event, it's just my own preference. For safety, I keep them off. If anything cuts the power to them, I want to make sure the power is back on and staying on before the customer turns this back on. Especially if it's happening, let's say it's a Friday or a Saturday or Sunday, nobody's in the office, and we have a big storm roll in, and it's causing a power outage on and off and on and off. We come in on Monday, I get a phone call, and the unit's completely dead and will no longer turn on. And I don't know what happened. All I know is we had a storm and now the customer's calling. The way that I do it, by leaving it off, never had a situation that the power outage has caused any damage or data loss or corruption. So that's the reasoning behind it. Again, I have to support it. I'm the one who's going to get the call. Just looking in the chat for if there's any other questions. Daryl says a silver Sharpie works wonders for that hard to see button. Yeah, you know what? If you want to take a silver Sharpie to $1,000, well, this is $1,300 for the 220 terabyte drives and the NAS, and you're going to take a Sharpie to it, have at it. It's not very professional from a customer's perspective if that's what I bring them for that kind of money. You could also use a label maker or something, but in any event, you know, just be aware of it, and how you deal with it is your choice. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. So since it beeped, now we can access it, and we're going to access it the same way you access any web page. The only difference is that this web page is coming locally from within your network, so people from outside cannot access it unless you specifically configure it. But out of the box, no. So let me see how I'm going to do this. I guess I'll use Edge. Bring up Microsoft Edge. And I have to go to OBS and tell it I want to capture that window. So bear with me as I configure OBS for this. And there we go. Okay, so while we're in Edge, we can type in find.synology.com, and it's going to search our network for a Synology NAS. Sometimes this doesn't work, but usually when it's brand new, it does. Now look at here. It's found it. It tells us there is no server name because it has not been configured. The IP address has been auto-assigned by our router, and nothing, the Mac, the serial, the DSM is the operating system. So we don't have any information yet because this has not been configured. So I'm going to hit the connect button. And in just a moment, we're going to get a logon. I think we're going to get a logon. It says, welcome. Set up your Synology DS218 Plus now. Click Setup. It says install the latest DSM. Again, that is the operating system. So we'll say install now. It does say that when doing this, all the data on the 2 drives in the NAS will be erased. That's okay. They're brand new drives. There's no data on them. And that's why you want to do this right out of the gate. The Synology operating system that was put on the NAS is coming from what's embedded on the NAND. As a result of that, it's out of date, right? So the way we get the latest version of the operating system is when we're connected to the internet. You absolutely want to have best practices in place, and that means don't waste your time configuring and setting up your NAS with an out-of-date operating system. This needs to happen first. And Synology doesn't really give you a whole lot of choice. That's the normal setup. If your NAS was manufactured at such a point that it's the same version of operating system, which is possible, then obviously it would check and say no update was necessary. But it does force that check. That's how important this is. And given that in this scenario, it's erasing the drives, don't misunderstand that. The updates that we're going to get going forward are not going to erase the drives. I'm not quite sure why this one does, but that's pretty rare. But another reason to get it out of the way before you get too far into it. This is the first thing you want to get done. It doesn't take very long, usually under 10 minutes. And so while that's installing, let me go back to the chat room here. And once again, if you guys have questions for me, This is a good time to ask because we're just kind of waiting, just staring at the screen at this point. Wayne wants to know what the warranty is. The warranty is going to be two different warranties, one on the drives themselves and one on the NAS. The warranty varies from country to country, and usually when it comes to the drives, Seagate and Western Digital share the exact same warranty for the same range of drives. So in other words, the cheaper home drives probably have less of a warranty, and they sell for less. And I think you'll find very little difference in performance, capacity, and price between Western Digital and Seagate in every regard. They're very, very similar. The Synology device itself, that's a fair question. I'm not quite sure what the warranty is on that. I do have links to both the Synology NAS and the drives that'll take you to Amazon, and I do believe the warranty information is in there. Now, I would guess the Synology is probably 1 to 3 years. I don't know exactly. The drives are likely, I don't know, are they 3 years? Regardless, I'm not too concerned about the warranty on it because these things have proven to be so reliable, including the IronWolf Pro drives that I've been using. I don't think I've had one go bad yet, knock on wood. But that is a fair question I don't know the answer to, but maybe somebody in chat can answer that for me. It's a good question.
The Synology itself, it's 1 year from the date of purchase.
It's 1 year on the Synology NAS for all models or just this one?
I believe.
I think if you buy the bigger, more expensive NAS, I think the warranty's longer, but I'm not sure. Ron Byron says his Seagates are a 3-year warranty and 12 terabyte shipped from China and failed, and RMA warranty was not honored. I don't know why your warranty was not honored unless your drive was a fraud. So there's got to be more to that story. They absolutely, Seagate and Western Digital, have always covered their warranties without question or doubt. And I don't know where you're buying your drives, but I'm sourcing my drives typically from Amazon or Newegg. If you're going to some eBay or something else and you're buying gray market drives or something, any gray market products will have no warranty. These drives, because they're professional drives, they do include a data recovery warranty from Seagate. I've never used it. Again, I haven't ever had a failure. And in the box, if you rewind this video, the paperwork that came with those 20 terabyte drives, you'll see a little orange and white or red and white little card with a big red letter R, and that's the data recovery guarantee and how it works. And you're not going to get it fast. So I've never utilized it. I don't know what its limitations are or how long it takes, but you should never be in a position that you should need that. You should always have a backup. There should be no excuse to ever have to send a drive in for data recovery. But that's correct. Warranties for the drives there's a separate warranty that Seagate includes for the data that's unusual, and it's separate. Patrick Rizza said, I bought a Western Digital drive, found out it's a shucked drive, and Western Digital did not honor the warranty, so no more eBay drives for me. Yeah, unfortunately, it does seem the people who are looking to save the money spend far more over time than people who just buy the product like a regular consumer. This idea that you're looking for a bargain, usually you're going to pay far more than you ever imagined. It's very risky. Now, I'm not the gambling type because I have a business to lose. If I lose my business, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. I don't know how I'm going to eat. So I don't play games like that. If you are somebody that enjoys going to the casino and going to the racetrack and you enjoy gambling and it's worth it to save a few bucks, all I ask is that you have a reasonable expectation of the difference in price and that you're okay with it, that you understand why you're paying less, and that if something bad happens, too bad for you. It's usually the people who can least afford it. That's why they're looking for, the cheaper way out. And then they'll end up buying another one. And they likely won't buy another one from the same source now that they've gone through that. So now they've spent about twice. If they'd have just bought it from Amazon or Newegg from an authorized seller, they would have saved far more money, as many of you have already experienced. Mike Ladd wants to know, do you have any idea of how often these may fail? It doesn't really matter to me. It's a question I don't understand. As long as the data is backed up, it doesn't matter. Failure of a drive is an inconvenience that's easily remedied with a NAS. Given that this NAS will be configured as a RAID 1 if either drive fails. We don't even have a recovery. All we do is pop the old drive out, send it in for warranty, pop another drive in. The NAS continues to function 100% as usual. The fixation on warranty when it comes to storage doesn't make any sense to me, apart from, yes, it's an inconvenience, and if you've got a major investment in a drive, and let's say these drives are $500 a piece, and it dies a month out of warranty, let's say that warranty is 1 year, that would be a concern. I haven't had one of these Seagate IronWolf drives die yet. So we're on about the 6th or 7th year of operation without a single failure. Out of how many drives? 4, 8, 10, 12, 20, 22, so let's say a little over 24 drives over 7 years, all IronWolfs, none of them have failed, anywhere from 12 terabytes. Most of them are 12 terabytes. These are my first 20 terabyte drives. So again, in the Synology NASs, I've never seen one fail. Our good friend Mitch had a Synology NAS that the power brick failed. And of course, Synology said, you have to buy a new NAS. And I said, I don't believe that's true. We went on we went to Amazon and we bought just the power adapter. It's like $20. And it's been running fine for Mitch ever since. So that's about the worst thing that typically happens, is your power brick dies. Sarge Tech wants to know, will you be assigning a static IP address to the NAS? No, never, ever do that. When you assign a static IP address to a device on the network, what ends up happening is when the customer makes a change without you knowing, they buy a new router, let's say, oh man, you're going to get support calls. So the new router goes in, or the cable company provides them some new equipment, and it sets a whole new IP address up. You're going to get the phone call. Always leave it on DHCP, and we're going to use essentially DNS to figure out what it is by calling it by name. You'll see the way I found it was by going to find.synology.com. If that didn't work, once I have this configured with a name, I can ping the name in a command prompt on the network, and it'll fire back to me what the current IP address is in that moment. It's not rocket science, it's not difficult, and beyond that, there's a separate utility you can download and install to find your NAS on your network. I have learned the lesson the hard way of setting IP addresses statically for businesses. If it's your own network and you're the only one who's touching it, you can set it up any way you want. But when you're coming into a customer's location, there's no guarantee that you're the only one that's touching that network, or that the customer might do something themselves. But there is a guarantee that when there's a problem and they consider you their guy, they're going to call you and you're going to get a support call out of it. Now, whether or not you use that as an opportunity to bill the client, or you do it under your own warranty for customer service, that's up to you. However, whatever you were doing, You are now interrupted for a problem that you did not create, but you are expected to solve ASAP. All avoidable by leaving it on DHCP. Trust me, in the chat room, that's the username, says, Kerry, you were right about the speed of those SanDisk flash drives. Wow, and thanks. Hey, I don't mess around with that stuff. Time is money. The Seagate flash drives cost more because you're getting way more. Edie says, I found on the Synology units, it's usually the power supply that fails. So yeah, we're talking about that little power brick. He says, I recommend a spare power supply on hand always. Yes, if you're supporting them, that's a good thing to have. But if you're supporting numerous models, they use different power supplies, and that can get kind of expensive. So I just deal with it as it happens, me personally. But, you know, certainly worth consideration depending on the kind of service you want to provide to your customers. Jim says, this looks like it's locked up, or am I being impatient? You're being impatient, Jim. Is doing a major thing here. It's downloading and then installing the new operating system. Let me just take a quick look at it. Yeah, so we've got a timer here. It says restarting your DiskStation, and that all seems normal to me. I'm not concerned yet. And that's why I wanted to just go to the chat room and fill this time with answering any questions, since under normal circumstances, I would be setting this up for a client in my office, which right now is Studio B. And while it's doing this, I could be working on another computer, answering emails, taking phone calls. I wouldn't normally just sit here and stare at it. So when you're staring at it, it seems like it takes a long time. Troll McTrollington has some questions about the NAS. I encourage you to look at the video notes for those kind of specifications. If you click on the link to Amazon for this NAS, you will get all of that information and more. Now, if you're curious if the NAS is locked up, one of the things you can do is just look at the front of the NAS to see if the lights are blinking, if there's drive activity. You definitely don't want to interrupt it if the lights are blinking. Now, the network light can blink, that's normal, but if drive 1 and drive 2, either one are blinking, then it is either reading or writing data to the drive. Also, the data that it's downloading, we don't know how big the operating system is and how long it takes to expand those files. We're going to be expanding the files using the processor of the NAS, not the processor of your desktop. The NAS isn't going to operate with the performance of a desktop. That's also why the NAS doesn't get as hot and isn't as loud with cooling fans. The processor it's got it's pretty big for an Internet of Things devices, but it's very, very weak compared to most modern desktop processors. But it's also why you can get the NAS for $300. Your desktop processor might be $300 all by itself, plus the motherboard, plus the RAM, plus the cooler, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm looking at the NAS, and I'm seeing the lights blinking mostly on the LAN. I see disk 1 did a little blink there. So whether or not it's locked up, it's too early for me to tell. I'm going to be patient. In the meantime, let's see what other questions we have here. Will adding memory to the NAS help? It can, depending on how you use the NAS. Like if you're going to be running virtual machines, many of the Synology NASs, they just use laptop memory, and you just buy laptop memory and slap it in there. If you're just using it as a storage device, it won't help you in any way, other than maybe something like this would happen a little bit quicker, but not much. Where it typically helps would be if you're running some software on the NAS above and beyond being a storage device. For example, virtual machines or video rendering or BitTorrent or something like that. Letting that have that memory, the unit will operate faster. I upgraded the RAM in mine just to see, and it was a waste of money for me. It made no difference whatsoever. But that's me. You obviously are going to use your NAS the way you use it and have your expectations. I can just tell you based on mine, it was a waste of money. But how else was I going to know? And just see if there's any other questions I've missed. I'm going to scroll up through the chat here real quick.
Are the drives hot swappable?
Are the drives hot swappable? Yes, you do not have to turn the unit off. If you see one of the drives is failed, you'd simply extract the drive while the unit is on, put a new drive in, slide it back in place, and you would log into the NAS. It'll say, it looks like you put a new drive in. Do you want to rebuild your array? You click yes. It'll tell you, I think it offers you two options, if I'm not mistaken. One is to just rebuild it normally with low priority, so you can use the NAS normally with almost no noticeable performance difference. Or two is you rebuild it with priority, but the NAS is going to be very slow in responding. I want to say the default is that it's going to rebuild normally, and they warn you that the response time on the NAS, well, you can still use it, may be a little laggy as it's rebuilding in the background. And then depending on how big the drive is, it could take a few hours to over a day. But the good news is it just runs in the background. There's nothing you have to do. And you'll get an update like a percentage to completion on the webs. You know, when you log into the software via the browser, you can close that, by the way, and then come back and reopen it or leave it open and get an update. You can also have it kick emails to you with updates as well. Carrie, Windows 10 22H2 was released today. Should I install it right away or wait? I know Windows 11 22H2 was released. Windows 10? That's news to me. Let me check the streamer and see if it shows an update here. I'm checking for updates right now. Oh yeah, you're right. Feature update to Windows 10 version 22H2 is available. Okay, well that's news to me. I would go ahead and download and install it because all these big version updates are essentially all the past updates from the last time it did a big update, and then a few little ones, maybe some feature enhancements. They're generally pretty safe. Of course, if you have a backup, it's not a big deal if you have to restore. If you have a problem with the install, it's supposed to uninstall on its own, not requiring the backup. At the end of the day, if you were my customer and you asked me that question and I was maintaining your computer, knowing that it's virus-free and in good shape, I would say yes, it's safe to update. At the end of the day, that's your choice unless you know specifically that there is a feature or enhancement in this update that you need. You are taking a risk for no reason whatsoever. It will eventually install on its own. But if you want to push it yourself, you can go ahead and download it and install it today, and then let us know how it went for you. In most cases, look, we've done this. This is the 5th big update to Windows 10, where there's nothing new here with regards to the way it's installing and what we can expect. It's not a brand new operating system. We're just refining what's already there. In all likelihood, you should not have any problem. It's been thoroughly beta tested before released. And if it proves otherwise, the only way you're going to know is through your own experience. If everybody said you should wait, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have a problem. And if everybody said you're fine, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to not have a problem. But I don't see any reason why you should wait. But I also don't see any reason why you should rush it. It's up to you. All right. Now I'm starting to wonder if this thing might be logged up. It is not counting down. It may have, at that point where it was supposed to restart, and I'm only guessing here because this is very unusual, it may have encountered some weird glitch that didn't complete that process. It shouldn't take this long. I've been biding my time, trying to be patient with it. And let me bring back camera 1. And let me put myself in a corner here. And the way you would power off one of these Synology NASs is you're going to hold the power button in almost universally on desktops and laptops. If you've got a lockup situation, just hold the power button in for about 10 seconds. I had a customer that kept pulling the power. And what can happen if you pull the power to force the power cycling, you will eventually corrupt the data on the drives. This customer was doing this once a day. They had a problem and they would get by the problem by just unplugging and replugging it in. And it wasn't made clear to me that's how they were cycling the power. Now, any sort of power spike that you're doing when you're plugging and unplugging it like that can damage the unit. You could still get corrupted arrays by forcing the power off without a proper shutdown, regardless of how you do it. So you want to do that as infrequently as possible. This has to be the last ditch thing you do. And if you're in a situation where you have to do it daily, you need to prioritize getting that fixed. I'm going to hold the power button in. The light starts to blink on the unit. It beeps, indicating that it's shutting down. Now, because we're on a browser page, that likely won't change because it's not a direct video output from the unit, right? We're on basically a web-based interface versus a video output. So it's very different. We're not getting live updates in that sense. The unit is turned off. It's quiet. It's not. Before it had a little vibration to it. When I put my hand on it, it has no vibration. It's dead. It's quiet. It's off. The lights are out. The fan isn't spinning. It's very easy to tell when it's off. Press and release that button. The light will flash again. We'll hear that beep in just a minute. And then the OS is loading. And it takes a good 30 seconds to 90 seconds to fully load the operating system. So we'll give that just a few seconds here. And then we'll refresh the browser page in order to figure out where we're at to go through the setup again. If this update failed, it's going to want us to do the update again. If the update was successful, then we'll continue with the setup. That's how we're going to know. Mike says it's a long restart. No, I mean, compared to what? This is a normal restart with a NAS. There's nothing unusual about the length of time that the Synology NAS takes to boot. If you're comparing it to a desktop, again, you don't have that kind of processing power. So it takes a little bit longer, and you're not going to do it very often anyway. Oystein contributes 50 Norwegian krona. He says, good morning from Norway. Good morning, Oystein. Thanks for joining. It's always good to see you, and thanks as always for your contribution. We're still loading here on the Synology. We should hear a beep when it's ready. I see and hear the drives. I see the lights are blinking. There's our beep. Now what I can do is go back to, let me turn the cam off so I can see full screen. And what can happen is when it installs the new OS, it could come back with a different IP address. So a refresh may not be enough. We may need to find NAS again, just so you know. So first we'll try the refresh. Looks like my browser is locked up. Maybe the NAS wasn't locked up, but the browser was. Well, that's interesting. So hold on a second. I got to deal with this little mess here. This was unexpected. Oh no, it's okay. Must have been on the wrong page. Refresh. Let me go back. That was the address it was at before. I'll bet you that IP address changed. I'll bet you that's what happened. So we'll just do find.synology.com. Refresh. Sometimes it doesn't find it the first go. Oh, it's not finding it the second time either. That's not good. Wow, that's a new one. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Let's do this. Well, I'm recording the browser. Let's go to, let's see. I'm trying to think what I'm going to search for. Find a Synology download. Maybe that's what I want. Download center, that's a good start. Please select the product. It's a NAS. Select your product. It's the 918 Plus. It says 4 bay. This is a 2 bay. Is that the wrong number? Is this a 918?
218.
218. My bad. 218. There it is. And then for downloads, we should have the little tool. There's the operating system, another version, desktop utilities. Synology Assistant is a desktop utility that searches for Synology servers within the local area network. That's what I want. You can have different versions for your operating system. Clearly, I want it for Windows. It's very small. We're going to download that, and I'm going to install it here on the streamer. You're not going to see that happening because I'm only capturing the browser window. And we're going to install, allow it permission, and in just a minute, I will run that. So bear with me here for just a minute. It's a great opportunity to show you how this works. At the end of the install, it says, do you want to run the Synology Assistant? I do. And in just a moment, that should appear. It wants permission from the firewall. I'm going to allow access. And then the next screen that comes up is the Synology Assistant, which I think I can I capture that? Let's try. Synology, right there. Enable the allow command, do not support password encryption. I don't know what that's talking about. So this is the little Synology Assistant. We'll hit search. Ah, that time it found it. Sometimes you got to search twice. If you recall, it was at 192.168.1.21, and now it's at 1.23. Really not a big deal. It'll probably stay at 1.23 for a long time now. So I'll go back up to the top of the browser here, and once again, let me change my window capture back to Microsoft Edge. Okay, so up here, I'm just going to type in 192.168.1.23, enter, and it should start us all over. Ah, this is very good. It says, welcome to DSM 7.0. Now, when we were just at the Synology page, it said the latest was, I think, 7.1.1. So there's another update to this update. Likely this had DSM 6, and that's a big version change. So going from 6 to 7 is a big update, but going from 7 to 7 point anything is a small update. Anyway, let's click Start, and let's just see. I want to make sure you guys are seeing everything. Yeah, you're getting it. So we have to give it a name. Now, this gentleman already has one. I've likely named it Server. So I'm going to call this one server 2. We have to give the administrator account a name and a password. This is always a tough one because really the customer needs to set this up. But we can change this later. If I try to set this to admin and I use a basic password, as I type it, you'll see it says it's weak. It may not allow this. Let's see what happens. I'll hit next. And it's highlighting both the name and password in red. If you noticed when I tried to hit next, it's saying these are not acceptable. So it won't let you leave yourself unsecure anymore. It used to. So what I'm going to do, see if I can leave admin alone, and let me change the password. Now we're at medium. And I'll just add basically a capital letter and an exclamation point to it. Will it let me do that now? No, it's not going to let me have that name. So what I'm going to do, we have to give it an account name. And it's really important you write this stuff down, folks, because it's literally anything you want it to be. And if you call somebody for support asking because you forgot it, likely the answer is going to be you're going to have to reset everything again. So what I'm going to do here, I've got to come up with something clever. What should I call this?
Have some fun with it.
Well, it's likely I either have to set it to something my customer's going to be okay with, or I have to wonder if I'm going to have to reset it to change the account name. I don't have to reset it to change the password, but I'm not quite sure about the account name. Rats.
Data here.
I think I'm going to put the customer's name, all lowercase. Let's see if that'll be okay. Seems to have accepted that. Select an update option for your DiskStation. Automatically install important, automatically install the latest. I always want to install the latest, not just the critical ones. And this one is just to notify you and don't install it, that you have to do it. So I'm going to choose that option because that's going to install the latest updates and packages rather than just the important ones. I think they're all important. Okay, create a Synology account. I don't do this. I'm going to hit skip. That's going to be able to access your NAS from other locations outside of your building. Things like Quick Connect, very useful utilities. And when you set them up right there, they're secure. But you know what's even more secure? Don't set that up. But again, that can be set up later, regardless if you change your mind. So we're going to skip. They're trying to convince us to sign up. We've got to create a Synology account. It's not mine to set up, so that customer would have to create their own account. So we're not going to do that. I'm going to say skip anyway. We will collect device information and hardware configurations. This is something Windows wants to do. Everybody wants to do this, to report the data without any sort of identifying information, just so if it crashes, what was running when it crashed. If they keep seeing a lot of crashes happening with a certain scenario, regardless of who it belongs to, the software engineers can redress that rather than you having to call and, they have all the data they need. You can choose to do that or not. I'm going to choose not to do that, only because it's sending data on a customer's internet connection. Everything we're setting here can be changed without having to reformat the NAS. Now it wants us to create the storage pool and volume. So here's where some of the fun begins. Hit Create Now. And it says create your storage pool and volume. It's explaining this as best it can with a diagram. And it says before data can be stored on your Synology NAS, please create at least one volume and storage pool. A storage pool is created through the aggregation of one or more multiple drives, and a volume is created on a storage pool. And it's where your data is stored. So in other words, it's like a partition and a drive. So when we create the storage pool, we're creating the virtual drive, and then the storage volume is the virtual partition. I just want one big drive and one big partition, and we'll use folders instead of actual partitions. That way we don't run into storage size limitations. If one, say we set it up with pools, if one pool gets filled, it's going to be a support call. If we fill it with folders, if a folder fills, that means the entire capacity of the NAS is now filled. So we're going to hit start. Now, in most cases, going with all the defaults, especially on a 2-drive array, is essentially what you're going to want. So it says RAID is a data storage virtualization technology that aggregates multiple drives into a storage pool. It's pooling the resources of the drives into one. Different RAID types provide different levels of performance, storage capacity, and reliability. Now it's going to default to this standard, most common recommendation. So here we're at SHR, and I think there's only one other option. Oh, we got a couple options. We've got RAID 1. So SHR, each one of these is explained. There's a minimum number of drives is 1. Drive fault tolerance is 1. If there's at least 2 drives. This is the recommended RAID type for beginners. Choosing this type allows you to combine drives of different sizes in the future to optimize volume size and ensure data redundancy, and that's confusing. In this case, I think I'd prefer RAID 1, which is minimum number of drives is 2, drive fault tolerance is 1. RAID 1 is most often implemented with a 2-drive array. Data on the drives are mirrored, just as I described, providing fault tolerance in case of a drive failure. Read performance is increased, while write performance is similar to that of a single drive. A single drive failure can be sustained with 0 data loss. RAID 1 is often used when fault tolerance is key, while capacity and performance are not critical requirements. Please note the capacity of a RAID 1 storage pool cannot be expanded by adding drives. Well, that's fine with me. Then, of course, we have basic. This type, you'll be able to install 1 or more additional new drives in the future and migrate them to RAID 1 or RAID 5 for data redundancy and data protection. And we have just a bunch of disks, or JBOD. Number of drives 1. This type allows you to expand drive capacity. Again, if you're one of these people that's just, I don't know, rubbishing around and you find a drive and that's how you run your place, have at it. But I wouldn't want to work for you. If you're just flying by wire with whatever you've got laying around, you're a support nightmare. So the JBOD is really a home user thing. It's not really something most businesses would entertain. RAID 0 would be if we want to combine the 2 20 terabyte drives in this scenario to one 40 terabyte drive, but now we've got no fault tolerance. If either drive fails, you've lost all 40 terabytes of data, even though only one of the drives died. Half of the data is on one drive, half of the data is on the other. If either drive fails, you've lost both as far as data goes. So we definitely don't want RAID 0. RAID 0 is typically used where you're trying to get the largest capacity and the fastest speed. So for me, I'm going to choose RAID 1 because likely this drive, this configuration rather, with these 2 drives will remain untouched for the next 5 to 8 years. So that's what I am choosing. You, of course, would choose what suits your environment and what you want to support if you're working for somebody else. I'll hit next on this, and it's asking me which drives do I want to include in this RAID 1. And of course, I want to include drive 1 and drive 2. Obviously, I could break these drives up into countless virtual drives, which is a nightmare to support. But I'm going to keep everything simple here. We're selecting all the drives and hit next. Now it's warning us, let me cancel this. It's warning us the total capacity of the 20 terabyte drive is 18.2. That's because they calculate the terabytes differently. We're not losing anything. It's still 20 terabytes. The manufacturer counts a terabyte as, I think 1024 is a K. No, they count it as 1,000. 1,000, whereas the math on this is counting it as 1024. So the drive manufacturer wants to use the number that makes their drive look the most capacious. So we're looking at 18.2 it's the term for this is gigabytes, G-I-B-I, versus gigabytes, G-I-G-A. If you want to Wikipedia that, it explains it much better than I did. So gigabytes versus gigabytes. Unfortunately, I've seen too many journalists say this 20 terabyte drive is 18.2 terabytes after you format it. No, it's still 20 terabytes after you formatted it. It didn't lose anything. It's that the Microsoft operating system is doing it, I think, in gigabytes, and the drive manufacturer is using gigabytes. It's so confusing and stupid. Anyway, that's normal and expected. We're going to hit next. Now, it's going to let us know we're obviously going to lose everything on these drives, but you and I both know these are brand new drives that have nothing on them to begin with. So this is just a boilerplate warning. And let's see, we recommend using drives. Oh, this is not what that warning says. It says these drives are not on the list of compatibility. You know what? These are compatible drives. It's probably because this operating system isn't updated to 7.11 is my guess. If I were going to use non-NAS drives in this Synology, this is the warning you're going to get. The reason we're getting it now, I'm assuming, is the 20 terabyte model is fairly new and the OS probably got an update to include it. That's my guess, but we're not going to get that update until after we install and configure the drives. So this is an unusual circumstance. Normally when you see this, you should only see this if you're using desktop drives or surveillance drives or literally any drive not designed for NAS use. Because we are using drives designed for NAS use, this shouldn't pop up unless the drives are so new they haven't been added to the list yet. So that's fine. We're going to continue anyway. We can do a drive check or skip the drive check. The drive check could take hours. And on new drives, in my experience, it's a complete waste of time. So I'm going to skip the drive check. And again, we can do a drive check later if we want to. The total capacity of this pool is going to be the 18.2 terabytes. And we can change or modify the size. We can put a volume description if we want to. I'm just going to leave all that blank and hit next. It says the entry for the field modify allocated drive size is invalid. So let me go back. You have to put a number in here. So the number is got to, I just want one big array. So whatever the big number is, 18622, that's our maximum capacity or available capacity right here. That's what I'm putting down here. I'm a little shocked it didn't fill that in by default. And I'm not going to give the volume a name. We don't need to put a name on there. I'll hit next. Now we have a question of which file system do we want? There's two, with the default being something called Butterfuss. BTRFS is the preferred, most robust file system option on a Synology NAS. If you want to go 10 years in history and use the Linux-based ext4 file system, have at it and live in the past and enjoy yourself. If you want the robustness of modern technology, I strongly recommend the BTRFS, the Butterfuss file system. And that may not be an option on other manufacturers' drives. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Here's a summary of everything we've set up, a RAID 1 with the two SATA drives, drive 1 and drive 2, the estimated capacity, the allocated capacity of what's estimated, and then our file system. Everything is it's weird that they give you a summary of everything. You just told it what you wanted to do, but I guess in some weird scenario, somebody says, I don't remember setting this. Anyway, I'm going to hit apply. And it says all the data, this is what I thought I was saying earlier, all the data is going to get wiped out on the drives. Of course. You're going to hear the drives. If the drives ever make any noise, this is when you're going to hear them chatter. And that's typical, and it's not very loud. It's kind of comforting to know it's working to me. And now, what's really cool is, even though this is going to take a while, we can already start using it while it performs the prepping in the background, which is really, really cool. Then it's going to give you a tour, if you want, of how to use this operating system, and you can go through that tour and learn all about it on screen versus going to Google or pulling up PDF files or watching YouTube videos. I'm going to close this out. You can go through that on your own time. And then finally, let's see, volume 1 is healthy. We're using 79.1 megs. I think I'm okay here. What I want to do at this point is I want to look for that DSM update. So we'll go up here. We're in the storage manager. We go up here. And then this is your operating system on the NAS. So we have the file station and the control panel and the storage manager. These are the 3 icons I go to most. There are other apps you can download just like with a smartphone or a tablet that are specific apps for the Synology, which I'm not using any of those, but you can check those out. I'm going to go to the control panel, and I'm going to look for, where's the update? Update and restore. It says checking. See, there is a new version. We're going to download that new version. And while we're doing this, once again, I can go back over to the chat room and look to see if you guys have any questions for me, and I'll do my best to provide answers for you. I have not been paying attention to the chat. I've been full screen as you are full screen watching this. And when I do that, it overlays the chat. Let me turn cam 1 back on. You'll see I'm still right here. I haven't moved. Nick Garcia contributes $10. He says, I appreciate all you bring to this community. Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you for being a part of the community. Mike Glad before that with a $10 contribution and super chat says, good info, Carrie, and thank you. Well, thank you, Mike. And XRod666 with a $5 super chat contribution. Hey, Carrie, he says, hope things are going great. So far, so good. A little bit of unexpected response from this, but I think I understand why. I guess Jim S. suggested sysadmin as the name of the account, or diskadmin was recommended. Yeah, those are all fine. Since the owner is David, I think he's going to remember his own name before he'll remember that stuff. What I usually do for my clients is I'll make a little Word document with the client's name with any IP addresses, router login, password, server, or NAS login and password, anything like that, because inevitably the customer will contact me 2 years from now. I can't remember what I did 2 years ago. Do you remember my SSID or my Wi-Fi password? How the heck would I remember that? So I will keep a little Word document for each customer. And I do that at no charge. That's ridiculous. By the way, I shouldn't be doing that unless customers are paying me for that. Alan Lindus joins us in the chat. Always good to see you, Alan. And I'm just continuing to look through the chat to see what I've been missing here. I am back over to Oystein's contribution earlier, so it doesn't look like I missed very much. If you did have a question I didn't address, please do ask it again. Mike Ladd wants to know if those analytics happen in the background. Do they slow your system down? Yeah, they do happen in the background, and they shouldn't slow anything down. Even your internet connection, it shouldn't be sending much, but there is a possibility that some bug happens and it starts cranking out data online, and you wonder why your internet's slow, and you find out it's your NAS just repetitively sending a loop of data. That has happened in the past from other internet connected devices, not specifically Synology. I'm averse to turning it on. I feel like if you want to study the product use, you could pay me for that. But the customer, of course, if they want to change that, it can be turned on or turned off right in the operating system that's on the screen right now in the configuration. You can adjust all that. It's not like the only thing you really have to set up that isn't going to change is your storage pool. To reset that, obviously, you have to erase the drives. So that you want to get right the first time. Everything else you can set and then change your mind later. It's not a big deal. Gerald Cochran with a $5 super chat says, you get the incompatible disk warning in DSM-7 if you're not using Synology branded drives. I wasn't aware Synology offered their own drives. That's a new one. No, these drives are absolutely supported. They are NAS drives. This isn't my first rodeo. So Synology's software telling you that, initially the first time I saw that, I was delighted because I had a customer using desktop drives that kept failing. And after a certain update, Synology said these desktop drives are not compatible. You need NAS drives. And I was, thank goodness for that, right? Because now it's not my word. It's not the customer choosing to believe me or not. Now Synology is putting their foot down. As for whether or not you use Synology branded drives, I'm not aware of any drives Synology makes. So I think these are on the compatibility list, and I believe in this update, it should no longer have a problem with these. But I could be wrong. I've never seen that happen before with a NAS drive in a NAS. Channel Zero says, my roommate became a member 2 weeks ago, but can't chat in the chat box. Can you help him at all? His name is Mega Jesse G. The chat is open to the public, so I can't explain that. If he wants to reach out to me in an email, he's certainly welcome to do so. And when I'm not live and when I have time, I can see if I can assist him then. Kyle says, is YouTube a side hustle and your customers are your main work? When I started my job, there was no such thing as YouTube. So yes, YouTube it's more than a side hustle. I'd like to flip it the other way. I'd like YouTube to be my main work and the customers to be the side hustle. So right now I've got fingers in both pies, but when push comes to shove, YouTube isn't an urgent thing. When a customer calls for support, that takes priority for obvious reasons. And as time permits, I do the YouTube stuff. If YouTube would pay me better, I thought by now I would be making more revenue from YouTube than from my business, but YouTube revenues keep getting reduced. So the channel has to grow just to stay flat. Just to make the money I made last year, I have 100,000 more viewers than I had last year, and I'm making exactly the same amount of money. That's frustrating. But you can make sponsorship deals outside of YouTube and find another way to fill in those gaps, but that takes a lot of time, and then that becomes a priority now to meet your obligations with a sponsor, because then you've got that money at stake. And then at the same time, if you're helping customers and they call with a priority and there's only one of you, you have to make a decision or you're going to be up 23 hours for the day. I don't want to put myself there yet. So preferably it'll be a smoother transition. And as for now, customers are priority, YouTube is secondary. And then Amazon I make videos for, and they're way down the list. But I would like to have more time available to do more Amazon videos. Alan says, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula received quite a bit of snow within the last 24 hours. Whew, I've never been to the UP, but I know the Grand Rapids area. It's still probably in the 60 degrees, 70 degrees. They're far, far away from snow. Lawn Dog says, towards the end of January 2021, Synology launched its own brand of hard disks and solid-state drives. This launch came in the form of 2 trios, a new line of hard disks, and a new line of enterprise NAS models. Well, that's all well and good. It doesn't bother me that they did that. But to suggest any brand but their own is not compatible is, I have a problem with that. It's deceiving and not true. But before, when I first saw it, Synology saying these desktop Western Digital Black drives are not compatible with this NAS, I was relieved. It shouldn't be letting people use those. Ask me how I know. I'll show you all those support calls I get. Okay, let's go back here. What was I doing? I was looking at something. Okay, we downloaded the update, and that's all it did is it downloaded. So now I have to apply that update. So I'll hit update now. The installation may take between 10 and 20 minutes. Please do not shut down the system during this update. Once the update is complete, the system will restart all services and packages. Do you want to continue? Now this doesn't really affect us right now because it's brand new. But imagine if you've got services running on this and somebody might be using it, or you might have a process running. Could it be an automated process of systems backing up to the unit? You want to make sure that that's not going to interfere with any usage of the drive, let's say a year or 2 years from now, where you've gotten accustomed to using it. So this is a very important warning. And of course, we get a nice big percentage reading here on the screen that lets us know the status of where we're at in the update. And I really like how Synology has done this. It's very obvious and clear, conspicuous. No guessing is necessary. Now, they said it'll take about 10 minutes, but you got to remember if there were a lot of services running, those services may need updates to be compatible as well. So if you don't have any services running, it likely will only take 2 minutes. See, when they're giving you the update, they don't know how much you're using the NAS or how long you've had your NAS. You could have 15 different services running on this in the next 18 months. Maybe. If so, be prepared to wait about 10 minutes. But since it's brand new and we don't have any services running on it, probably about 2 minutes. Just so you know. And let me go back to the chat. Scott wants to know if I've thought about using Starlink for internet when you move, if you're moving to a remote area. Starlink is a little unreliable from my understanding. If I were just uploading videos, it would be fine. But being live and being live for 3 hours, let's say, to have a stable satellite connection for 3 hours, regardless of clouds and weather and other people getting on the Starlink system and affecting the available bandwidth, it's too wishy-washy. Being live is extraordinarily demanding on a connection, and any type of satellite connection is not going to be good enough for live HD video for 3 hours of length. Again, if I was making videos, editing them and uploading them, I could use dial-up, right? Just set it to upload and go to bed. So for my scenario, Starlink is not going to be solid enough. It will be sometimes, and other times it won't be. So that means I either will have to stop doing live videos, or I will have to find a more traditional DSL or cable internet. You believe in Starlink? Oh, I think it's great. I just don't think it would be reliable on a regular basis. If I'm going to make a 2 to 3 hour video 3-4 days a week, it'll get there, yes. Unfortunately, though, the number of people that are using it in your area, it's going to saturate at some point. As a result, like Starlink might tell you, we're not going to sell you Starlink. And you'll say, but you've been promoting it. And they'll say, yeah, but we've already sold it to X amount of people in your area, and selling it to any more will risk the connection quality for everybody else until we get some more satellites up. We'll let you know. So if you're in, you're good. But if you want to come in after the fact, depending on where you're at, they might tell you no. Also, Starlink isn't really meant to be an internet service provider competing with other internet service providers. It's meant, as Elon Musk called it, better than nothing internet service. Putting all these satellites in orbit around the Earth really doesn't make any sense. The last I remember in school, the Earth is 2/3 water. So in order to cover the planet, you're covering 2/3 of those satellites. The vast majority of them are broadcasting to nothing, or a ship, one ship at the ocean. Hey, we got a beep. Looks like it rebooted. Let me go back to the screen and see what's happening here. Starting to update the packages. So that's part of the DSM update, is it's some of those packages are part of the operating system. So those packages have to be updated to continue to work. In addition, if you updated third-party packages or additional packages, then you'll need to get updates for those once this is done, or you might find things like your Plex server don't work anymore until you update the package. So just keep that in mind. It's standard process for pretty much any type of hosted service. Like this updating USB copy. I've never even used that package. Okay, we're back to the sign-in, so I got to remember what I set it to. Still updating. Oh, look, it wants to turn the device analytics back. I've already told it no. I'll tell it no again. Okay, I'm going to go back to the control panel. I'm going to go back to update and restore. It says your DSM version is up to date. Now, let's go, let's close that. Let's go to the storage manager. I usually drag the storage manager icon out here. If you click up here, you'll see them. Storage manager, there's a way, there, right click, add to desktop. I hate having to search for it. So let's go back to the desktop. Whoops. I've confused myself now. Let me refresh. That's better. So now we have the storage manager here. That, again, we could always go up here and grab it, but I prefer to just have it right on the desktop because I go in here a lot. So there's our volume. This is kind of a, you know, if you have multiple Synologies, it'll display them all in here. Storage. Looks good. We don't see any warning about the drive here. Data scrubbing. You should enable data scrubbing, and I would recommend it, I think, once a month. Storage pool, 1. Repeat every 6 months. I'm going to repeat it every 3 months, I think. I normally would do this every month, but since this is going to an individual's home, I don't think they're going to be that demanding. But in an office, the data scrubbing is really more important. And we don't need to run it right now because there's no data to scrub. And we'll hit save to apply those changes. And now, of course, we don't have a hot spare, so we'll forget that. Global settings, I'm not interested. You may not be able to find your Synology NAS on your Windows network by default. You want to make sure that the Windows Discovery Service works. What is it called? It's the WS service. It's in here somewhere. Where was it? Was it in Control Panel? Under... I do this so infrequently. Under Network. Network interface. Don't care about that. Don't care about that. Security. It's in here somewhere. I made a video on it. I have to go back and watch my own video. But you definitely want that WS turned on. Where is it? We're not on a domain. User and group I don't need. File services. Okay, well look, WS Discovery is what I was talking about. This was turned off by default. It looks like Synology has wisely made the decision to leave that on by default. Because before, without this box checked, when you'd go to your, browse your network, you couldn't find your Synology. It was driving people crazy. Then we have to set up a share. So for a shared folder, we'll do a couple of things here. Let me go back to, let's see, shared folder. Let's create a shared folder. And we need to give it a name, so we'll call it public. Probably should put an L in there. This is location. We don't want to hide it. Don't want to hide that. We do want to enable the recycle bin, but the recycle bin will only be accessible to administrators. I'm good with that. Even though this is a home user, we don't need that. We're going to just prevent confusion. We can encrypt it. I don't want to encrypt it because if you forget your encryption key, nobody can help you. It's gone forever. Next, do we want a data checksum for advanced data integrity? Sure, why not? Do you want to enable file compression to get a little more storage out of it, but slow it down? No, I don't. I think we have plenty of storage. We don't need any quotas. We'll hit next. This is a summary of what we selected. Next. And we want to allow everybody read and write access, including guest accounts, which otherwise the users will have to log in, and home users hate that. So what I'm going to do is hit apply, and then we'll go back to users and groups, and for the guest account we want to activate the guest account. Uncheck the deactivate and hit save. Okay, now in theory, what I should be able to do is go to my Windows search and type in //server2 and hit enter, and I should see the public folder, just as though it were a drive plugged into my computer, only this drive exists on the network. Now it's difficult for me to show that to you in OBS because you're just looking at one screen at a time. But if I go to Windows Capture and change the properties to the command window that opened, where was that? Or the Explorer window. You'll see when I typed in //server2, it opens the Windows Explorer window, the File Explorer, to this public folder. And if I double click on the public folder, I'll see the contents. Now, this is telling me I need to log in, which is, I absolutely don't want that. So I'm missing a piece here in the configuration to allow guest access with no password required. Normally, you could just put any name in here. Like I could put the word guest, tell it to remember my credentials and hit OK. And that should, well, it didn't work, but that's okay. I don't want this to even come up at all. Remember, the idea behind this is that the customer can pull up their laptop or their tablet or their desktop and have immediate access as long as they're on the LAN. Not that if they're from outside of the building, we have to set up a separate and less secure. It's secure, but it's less secure. I prefer to have no way in from outside unless it's absolutely required. If you have a way in from outside, then theoretically so do the hackers. If you have no way in from the outside, neither do they, unless your Synology is out of date and there's an exploit they're taking advantage of, in which case they can do something you can't do. If you're keeping everything up to date and you want to be extra cautious, don't turn on access from the outside. If your whole purpose behind buying this is so you have your own virtual cloud that you can access from anywhere, you could always use remote software and log into a remote machine on your LAN and access it through the remote machine as like an intermediary without having to turn on external access. Or if you feel safe in setting up a secure password and turning that external access on, have at it. But I would caution beginners against it without fully understanding the risks. So for right now, there's something I'm missing I want to look at. So we're going to go back to the window capture of the Synology screen. or setup page here. And let me see what I'm missing. I'm missing something.
Remember, you're only allowing 2 users. The built-in admin account and David. Yes.
No, guest is turned on now.
Oh, you,
I turned it on, but maybe I didn't turn it on the share. The share wasn't really offering it to me until this was on. Now I got to go back to the share. Where was the share? Up here. Edit. Permissions. Guest. Has no access. We want this to be read write and save. Now if I go to edit, permissions, now guest has read and write permissions to the share. So if I go back to my public folder and I double click on it, yeah, now it lets me in without request. That was the piece I was missing. That was it. Okay, so again, if I bring up, change the window capture back to File Explorer here. Now you'll see that when I double click on public, you'll see the recycle bin folder, and that's where anything you delete goes. And then you can also configure that to auto delete the recycle bin after a certain number of days or a certain size. If you don't set that up, at least the way Synology used to be, is it would just build and build and build, and you'd have this 20 terabyte storage that has 5 terabytes free and 5 terabytes of data, and the customer's going, where's my other 8.2 terabytes? It's in your recycle bin, you gotta empty it. So it's best to automate that unless you're somebody a little more, wanting more control.
That's the recycle bin in DSM,
Not the recycle bin in Windows. Yeah, so if you delete a file on your DSM, on your server, your NAS, and whoopsie, and especially when you're sharing files amongst a number of users, like in a small office, one user deletes the file by mistake, everybody's freaked out because that's the only copy of it apart from the backup. That's why it's still important to back this stuff up. Now, backing these up, I do for my clients very simply by attaching a USB storage drive to any workstation computer and saying, copy all of the folders here, copy them over the network onto the USB drive. There's no software. I don't use any, I don't need a Cronus for that. I will use a file synchronization because they have 500,000 files. I don't want to copy 500,000 files every time. So I run the file synchronization software and say, look at everything on the NAS in this folder. In that folder, there's only one folder, and all the subfolders. Take that and duplicate it to the local drive on this computer. And if anything is on this drive that isn't on the NAS, delete it from the drive. If anything that isn't on the NAS, if anything that is on the NAS isn't on the drive, then copy it over. So any changes, additions, deletions, whatever the NAS has, I want it all moved to the USB drive. That first copy, after a NAS has been in use for a long time, can run overnight. But then running the synchronization software, depending on how often you run it, you're just copying file changes and deleting files that have been removed or moved into other folders or renamed. That's very, very quick, especially compared to doing the whole thing over and over and over again. Imagine if all I did was kept copying all the files from here over to a USB drive. What that means is when I'm deleting files from here, it's not deleting them from over there. So after a few copies like that, they won't be the same size. The USB drive will just keep getting bigger and bigger. So it's important that when something's deleted off of here, I want it deleted off of the USB, but I don't want it the other way around. You never want to delete anything off the NAS in a file synchronization, or you're probably going to have a really pissed off customer you're going to have to deal with. So, all right, those are the basics. That's just getting started. That's really simple stuff. When it comes to the types of things you can do with this now, like right now, we could map a drive letter. We could say, let's make this drive letter X, and let's set every laptop and computer in the building to assign drive letter X to this. So everybody knows, save your work to the X drive. They don't have to log into anything. They just double click the X, no differently than any other drive letter that they're accustomed to using on their computer, except that it's shared. Everybody can read and write to it. Second thing is we can look at all of those services and packages that are available uniquely to the Synology. Let me we'll take a quick look at that together. I don't know how this has changed over time, so probably be a discovery exploration for me as well. Let me go back to the browser here, and let's go back to, let's get rid of camera 1 just so you can see the whole screen. And we'll close the control panel out. As for automating the emptying of the recycle bin, I gotta find that. Let's see. Let's close this. We'll go back to, would it be the file station? No, it's not the file station. Is it? Action. Nothing. Tools. No, that's not it. It's in here somewhere. It's not there. I'll find it. I'm trying to think. Is it the control panel under shared folder? Action. Empty all recycle bins. If we click on that, no, I thought it offered us a menu here. It's in here somewhere. I'll say yes, just to see. Nope. Where is it? This is where you change the name of your workgroup on your peer-to-peer LAN. It's set to the default of workgroup, as is Windows when you install Windows. Of course, if you're not finding the NAS on your network, do verify that you're on the right workgroup name, which if you haven't changed it, the default is workgroup. If you have changed it, you'll need that to align to see it and when you're browsing the network. Where is that recycle bin option? Maybe it's under shares. Let me close this and let's go under the storage manager. No, it wouldn't be the storage manager. It would be the I thought it would be under shared folders, but that's just where I was, wasn't I?
There's a task schedule.
Where is it?
Go back.
Task scheduler. Okay. Create. Schedule task. Recycle bin. Hey, thank you for that. You can give it a name, how often you want to schedule it. Run it on the following days or the following time, or how frequently. I'd say let's run it. I don't want it daily, I'll tell you that. Daily, weekend, weekdays, there's got to be another. Run on the following date. How about we say, let's run it on January 1st of 2023, and then we want to repeat that every 3 months and hit OK. Do you want to enable recycle bin for all shared folders? Well, we only have one shared folder, so it doesn't matter if we answer yes or no to that. So that's how you set up that task. We can also do the RAID scrubbing. We could say create another task. And let's see, how come RAID scrubbing isn't in here? Service. What service? I don't know. Cancel, I don't want that. This gets a little confusing because I think you schedule RAID scrubbing in a different menu. That's a little weird. So I think that's under shared.
But there's your notifications. That's important.
Where's notifications? Oh, it's down here. Remember I told you the Seagate, the Synology NAS will email you when there's problems? Well, you have to configure that. And this is where you set it up under notification. Thank you for pointing that out. So here you would put in, you can check the box to enable email notifications. You're going to put in the email address you want the emails to go to.
Or text.
SMS.
Does it do SMS? I don't see that option.
It's the email, the tab. Right next
Oh,
to it.
up here, the tabs. Okay, well, I've never set up SMS notifications. Mobile push service, so that's pretty cool. I've never seen any of this. I stick old school with just send me an email, but yes, SMS, push, and these are the rules of what you want sent. Okay, so here you put in your email address, and then you want to make a subject line that you're going to understand what it is when you get it. If you're like me and you're supporting 15 of these out in the field, how do you know whose it is? Could be my own for all I know. So you definitely want the subject prefix to be like your client's name or location, something that help you identify which NAS it is, and then it'll follow that with whatever the subject line is of why the notification is sent. Finally, you would have to sign into your email service. So if we're sending it via Gmail, let's say, I would have to log into my Gmail account on this machine. Just bear that in mind. It's not an email server. This needs you to have authentication to send messages from whatever email service you're using. That's a requirement. If you don't want to do that, then perhaps look into SMS or push notifications. Thank you for pointing that out. I completely forgot.
Can you set up the type of notification?
I always leave the type of notifications to default.
Okay.
All right, but yes, if you're getting bombarded with notifications and you're like, geez, this is driving me crazy, you can check, do you want these sent in email, and you don't have to set up one or the other. You can set up email notifications, SMS, and push notifications all simultaneously. And as you can see, the defaults here are notifications being sent. If there's an improper external device ejection, it's only going to send it to email, not to SMS, but it will also send it via the push service. So again, I leave all this to default. It might be worth your time to skim through that and determine if some of this stuff is nonsense, you don't care, or if you want all of it all going to one way, or if you only want certain things going certain ways. That's entirely up to you and fully customizable. I don't get into this, quite honestly. What I do is I leave all the defaults on. I only use email notifications, and I've never really had any problem. I know when there's going to be an operating system update. It'll email me and say a new DSM version is available and it will install in 10 minutes unless you log in and tell it not to, followed by the new DSM has been updated, because I may not get those messages for hours after they're sent, but I want the updates. There's never an occasion where I'm going to tell it not to. Yeah, so that's under notification. Under hardware and power, you can plug in. I don't want to do that. Let me go back and uncheck that box. You can go to hardware and power and plug in, let's say, UPS. And then the UPS would plug into the USB port on the back of the NAS and tell the NAS, we've lost power, you need to properly shut down so we don't have any data corruption. So you can also put on a power schedule. You can set your hard drive hibernation. This is set default at 20 minutes. What ends up happening if, let's say, you've gone to bed, after 20 minutes of no use, the Synology NAS puts the drives into hibernation. You wake up in the morning, you go to use your Synology NAS, you double click on your share, and it doesn't pop up as quickly as it used to. Well, that's because your drives are waking up, and so your initial response will be delayed. But then as you use it from that point forward, it'll be snappy and responsive as you're accustomed to. So it does take a minute to wake up, but it's worth it for the power savings, and it also will extend the life of your drives. So let me go back over to the chat. Where's my chat? I lost it. Oh, here we go. And I'll turn camera one back on. And I think we can wrap this up. This has gone on a little over 2 hours. I wanted it under 2, but it's me. If there's any questions I have not addressed, speak now. And I'll do my best to provide an answer for you. In the chat, Timo wants to know, will the NAS send you alerts about RTX 4090 restocks? You know what? There might be a package for that. And in fact, that's what I was in the middle of attempting to do before I got squirreled into this. So let me give you an example of the packages that are available and some of the things that you can run as services on this NAS. I fully intended to do that a minute ago, and I'm trying to wrap it up. So let me go back to the NAS, and let's close out the control panel here, and let's go to, there's like a package center. Here it is, package center. And then you've got this kind of terms of service you have to agree to. Of course, you don't have a choice. You got to scroll to the bottom. And let's see, check the box. I've read and agreed to the package center terms of, sure we did. Click OK. Now you'll see that there are a bunch of services here. Active Backup for Office, Antivirus by McAfee. Some of these cost money. Audio Station, if you want to provide your own audio server to go to a Sonos or other audio devices, a DHCP server, Cloud Sync. You can have one of these Synologies synchronize, let's say, from your customer's office to your home after hours, and they just synchronize over the internet. If you and your customer have the bandwidth to support that, you'd have to install the package for that. exFAT access, that would be for external drives using the exFAT file system. A couple of different backups. Glacier backup is a cold storage. I don't want to get into this. Cold storage is very slow, but it's inexpensive cloud storage. Is that a good example? Sure, let's stick with that.
It's data that's not used very often.
It's data that's not used very often, but it's slow. And it's cheaper than regular cloud storage.
It's like data you have to store for 7 years.
Well, no. Well,
It's
okay.
secure,
There's an
but
iTunes server, an LDAP server. There's another backup. There's lots of backup software on here. We've got the Migration Assistant, which I don't know what that's for. There's a media server, a mail station. That's pretty cool. There's a note station. There's the OAuth service for authentication. PDF viewer on the NAS, which is kind of crazy. A proxy server, a Presto file server. Secure sign-in service, SAN manager on a NAS, which is weird. Replication service, SMB service, SMIS provider, snapshot replication. That would be sort of like Acronis. So Acronis isn't the only company that does what they do. There also may be an Acronis package for this, for all I know. And you see, we only have what? Does that say one? Yeah, so by default, we're only installing one of these packages. There's the Synology chat server. That's pretty cool. Contacts, directory, drive server, another mail server, a version of Office. That's pretty cool. Synology's own. A text editor, USB copy, universal search, a video station, a virtual machine manager, a VPN server, a WebDAV server, a web station. And then there are beta packages. And then that's going to have warnings about, hey, you know, this isn't fully baked, may cause problems, don't blame us. There's your Plex media server in there, Python and Synology drive server. And then beyond that, there may be packages that you can download that are not supported, and you waive your rights to any complaining if you choose to overwrite Synology's approvals and put anything you want on there. Very much like your phone. If you have an Android phone, you have the option of, you know, got to go into the settings and check the box that says, I want to be able to install it's not called unauthorized, but applications that you're downloading from the web, not available from the Play Store. There's a word for that.
authorized?
It's kind of like unauthorized, but it's like independent. It's not been verified. And if it's a virus and you screw your system up, you know, we don't advise you to do this, but it's your device. I don't think Apple lets you do that in any case. But regardless of that, I recommend you stick with what's there. But there's more than this. But you probably shouldn't be using that stuff.
So packages look free, but you don't know if you have to pay for it.
It depends, yes. So the packages to download and install are free. Some of them may be trials or limited unless you pay for them. Some of them are just free. So I don't know if you can click on one to get that kind of information. Let's see if we go to Hyper Backup and click on it. It shows the size of it. It shows the version, how many times have been downloaded, what category. Well, I don't know, but I'm sure McAfee's not free, so let's look at McAfee. Yeah, see, it says try. So maybe that's the difference. So you get a trial, and if you wanted to continue, you pay money. And I guess that money would go to McAfee and not to Synology. It says the developer is Synology. I have no idea. I don't use any of this
Well,
stuff.
that's the engine, but
Okay.
McAfee would update them.
I would assume that's between you and McAfee, but I don't know. In any event, that's just an example. It's a little taste, and you can just dive deep in this and go down that rabbit hole, and we'll see you in 2 years. I don't want to do that in this video. The rabbit hole at 2.5 hours, I think, is plenty enough of a very, very thorough taste of what to expect and what potentials there are with a device like this. So, finally, if there's any questions I didn't answer, I'll do my best to provide answers now, and then we'll wrap it up. So let me go back to my chat over here. So the reason I was laughing about will the NAS send you alerts about RTX 4090 restock is there could possibly be one. I mean, I think it'd be kind of stupid to run it on a NAS.
Do you want what your NAS to tell you on that?
You know what? What you want your NAS to do is your business. Somebody could have wrote a little app for that. It's not like it's difficult. Of course, there's a number of web services that are free that'll do that for you anyway. But of course, a lot of other people are using those too.
Right.
Ah, well. I wish I had the kind of money to worry about it when 4090s were in stock, just for a graphics card. When I could buy a new dishwasher, washing machine, dryer, and refrigerator for the same amount of money that would last a lot longer and are physically made up of a lot more materials. Like I'd feel like pound for pound I'm getting more for my money than a 4090. Next week, watch my video when I'm reviewing a 4090. Hypocrite.
Watch the 4090, like 15 pounds.
That 4090 is probably, yeah, it's big and heavy and expensive, and it gets super hot. It'd probably increase your electric bill at the end of the month too. All right, let's see. Did I miss any other questions? Kelly Stewart says, good evening, Kerry. I've got a Synology DS218 Plus with 4 gig memory upgrade from Synology, and for some reason the memory expansion module cannot be installed, but I'll keep trying. Also, check your phone. So the installation of the memory module, you definitely want the unit turned completely off. You'll take the drives out and you should see the empty memory socket. You shouldn't have to open it up in most cases, and the memory goes in on an ego, clicks in, just like you see me do on a laptop. It is laptop memory. You'll put your drives back in and turn the unit back on. You should be done. Just like with a laptop, there's no software to configure. There's nothing to do after. I'd have to look up the 718 just to see what the process is. There's probably some YouTube videos here where they've already done that, and I'd recommend you watch one of those, and if you haven't already, follow the steps as they show. Also, make sure your memory is functional. If you got a bad memory module, you'll just be going around in circles. Oh, and Kelly sent a $50 Amazon gift card again. Well, thank you, Kelly. As always. Amazon gift card for $10 comes in from Wayne Shirley. He says, loving the demo and the tutoring. Very educational and informative and always nice. Thanks, you guys, for supporting the channel. I deeply appreciate it. And that, I think, catches me up. All right, it is almost 8 o'clock in the evening here in Phoenix. I am exhausted. So, if you have further questions, please do leave them in the comments below the video. I want to thank all my friends in blue, all my supporters that are also green, for supporting the channel by subscribing, not just subscribing, but joining as a member. If you look below the video, you might see a join button. If you don't see the join button, but you do see a subscribe button, after you hit subscribe, the subscribe button should then become a join button. It's $9.99 a month, and that just helps support the channel. Like I said, YouTube pays worse this year than every year. It's like worse, and you have to keep growing and expanding just to stay flat. I want to continue to do more on YouTube, but to do this kind of video content is expensive. If I was somebody who just went to the store and bought some food and taste tested it, it would cost me $10 and my videos would generate the same amount of revenue. So this kind of content, obviously more complex, a little more detailed, costs more money to make, and the amount of content I make and the variety of content is strictly limited by my funds. Or I can sell out and have a sponsor tell me what products I'm going to talk about and what I'm going to say about them. I really don't want to do that. That's not why I started this. So if you want to see more content from me and you want more variety of content, you can be a part of that happening by becoming a supporter. If you're not a supporter, that's fine, but understand that if you're not seeing as much content or as often, it's because of the amount of money I have to work with. So you get what you get. So I just want to set your expectations accordingly. And that's why, to my supporters and contributors who are doing so voluntarily, not because they have to, but they want to, that's why I appreciate you guys so much. Looking at the contributions today, YouTube didn't save it, of course. YouTube on the studio has a thing called viewer activity, and it's supposed to keep track of all the contributions that are made in the broadcast. And it hasn't been working for a long time. It will work if I select it at the very beginning of the broadcast, if I select that tab. But that tab should have information in it regardless. And it's frustrating to me because I like to go back and say thanks again to everybody who gave a super chat contribution during the broadcast. I cannot do that when I don't have the list. But you know who you are, and I hope I caught everybody and gave you the credit you deserve. I do see one name in the viewer activity that says Mike Ladd just became a supporter. Well, thank you for that, Mike, and I hope you'll consider supporting the show if you haven't already. And if not, I hope you'll appreciate the content for free as it's made available, that's all. And to my moderators who are making sure the chat room stays civil, as always, thank you for not allowing these trolls to disrupt and distract me. I do that well enough on my own. You know, this is a half-an-hour video that took me 2 hours to complete. So that's bad enough. We don't need to make that worse. Mike says, I've been around 5 or 6 years watching you, and I support you, Carrie. Well, your name looks familiar to me, Mike, and I see you're blue. So, no, I appreciate you. Again, thank you. Carrie, I can't find the join button, says Jess and Claire. I'll just keep sending Amazon gift cards. That's all well and good. There should be a join button depending on what you're watching YouTube on. If it's a television, if it's a smartphone, if it's a tablet, if it's a browser on a PC. Everything I'm describing is through a browser on a PC. You should see the join button there. You could probably Google that too to get an answer for the device you're on. But any support, again, the Amazon gift cards, or even sharing the links to your social media, using my Amazon links when you're making purchases on Amazon. I make a small commission from that, although I don't know who's making the purchases, so you're anonymous, but you're not paying any more for anything. And then that adds up. It's a little 1 or 2% commission on every sale from anything sold from somebody clicking on my Amazon link to take them to Amazon, who then proceed to make any purchase. I do make a small commission from that. There's no secret, and it's a great way to anonymously support the channel for stuff you were going to buy anyway. It doesn't have to be tech stuff, just stuff from Amazon. And yeah, I think that's going to be it. I'm just taking one final look at the comments. Yeah, I don't see any other questions about the NAS. If you're watching the video later, again, I may not be able to answer all the questions, but you guys are certainly more than welcome to jump into the comments and provide answers if you believe you know the answers. Synology has not paid me to do this. Synology has not provided me anything ever. Synology doesn't even know who I am. I am making this video because I want to. This Synology unit is bought and paid for. It's not me who's bought and paid for, okay? The equipment's been purchased so that I can speak openly and honestly without having a corporation tell me they have to approve my video, or tell me when I have to publish it by, or tell me anything. So I have the freedom and independence of an independent review because I'm buying the equipment myself. In this case, this is going to a customer, and I just thought, 2 birds, 1 stone, right? And so I was very excited to do this, as I mentioned right from the beginning. PC storage, it's like my fetish. I just can't get enough of PC storage. I've got tons of flash drives and tons of different NVMe drives and external USB storage, and NASs and drives plugged into the back of routers. I don't know why, that's my thing. So you're gonna see a lot of that on this channel because I like doing it. More builds, more repairs, more reviews, more interviews, maybe some upcoming deals from the good folks at RoboForm and Acronis. Still working on that in the background. These things take time. And I hope to get you guys a special offer only available to you guys for a limited time from these companies. And I hope you'll take advantage of it. That's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you. Thanks to Camera Girl. And no thanks to Synology or Seagate. We bought all that stuff. They can thank me for making a purchase from them and recommending their equipment. I wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't good. Other YouTube channels might recommend it because they were paid to recommend it. I don't run my business that way. I don't intend to run my YouTube channel that way. So because of that, I just won't get as big as those other channels get or get big as quick because I just won't do it. So I hope you understand, and I hope even more than that, I hope you deeply respect the integrity of that because I could be living in a much bigger house. I could have my Tesla. Doesn't matter. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.